This is a very informal, just basically, hopefully, helping and equipping and allowing you guys to ask some questions. So.
Folks, press plus. You said you were going to talk a little bit. But I've seen it on your website. I'm trying to figure out, well, what is it? It looks like it's
Okay, that's a great question.
Yes, it is.
All right.
He's just lobbing.
I know he really is. So I'll talk for just a few minutes about kind of some of the things we've tried to do recently at Focus Press, and I'll get to Focus Plus in a second. The first one is the podcast that we do. Think Deeper is by far our I guess most popular kind of flagship podcast, if you might say, where myself, Joe Wilkie, and Jack Wilkie try to tackle basically current events from a Christian perspective. Tough questions that Christians, have questions about. We cover masculinity, femininity. I mean, you name it, we've probably covered it, and we've covered it in detail over 2 years. In fact, we just recorded, it's going to be dropping tomorrow or Monday, our 100th episode. And so, Think Deeper is a podcast that we do. If you're a podcast listener, Christian podcast, I, of course, give that one a recommendation. The other one we do, I know we've got some faithful listeners to that already, is the Godly Young Men podcast. That's something that myself and Joe are involved in. It's actually our only video podcast. We put it on YouTube so people can watch it because a lot of young people like to do that. But basically, our target for that is young men ages 15 to 25. And we basically tell them, like, look, this is what the world expects of you as a man, and this is why that's wrong. The world has a very twisted view of what it means to be masculine, a very twisted view of what it means to be a man. And so we try to take, again, a biblical perspective and say, this is what it means to be a man. This is what a godly young man needs to know about, again, all kinds of issues. And so we're about around 50 episodes for that. So those are the two big ones that we have that I'd recommend. As far as Focus Plus goes, that is something that we started May 1st, I believe. Essentially what it is it is a platform where we offer a whole lot more content, kind of for basically like a streaming service, subscription-based service type of thing, where you pay $10 a month and you get access to scriptural videos of like answering tough Bible questions that Jack does. We release a sermon every single week for people to listen to. There's articles on there. We also do an extended segment of our podcast that only people that are subscribed to Focus Plus can access, where we let you comment and we basically answer your comments, basically like an extended Q&A about our podcast episode. So we've got a video. We got I think an hour video session on transgenderism on there that my dad did actually also, and we're looking to add more of those, kind of like big cultural issues, global warming. He wants to do one on Islam, homosexuality, all kinds of stuff like that. And so basically it was just a way that we said, hey, if you're looking for a way to support our work, if you'd like to donate, here's an option, and you also get tons of content that you get to enjoy. And so that's on the online, focuspress.org/plus. If you download the Patreon app, just search Focus Plus, you'll find it. I'm a big believer in it, and I think it's something that hopefully is beneficial to families. Everything else we do at Focus Press completely free, as far as like the podcasts are free. The media, the stuff Dad posts online to read, all that's free. There's a lot there. I don't know what you want to add.
Yeah, I was just going to say, once you subscribe to it, you're actually going to get text or little messages that say, hey, they just uploaded some more stuff. Hey, there's an article for you to read. Hey, there's a lot of people didn't think that they would be able to pull it off as far as adding enough content to really, 4 things a week, to really make this worth something. They're knocking it out of the park. They came to me probably 2 years, it may have been more like 4 years ago, and I just kept putting them off. But about 2 years ago, they came and said, look, we really need to do this. I'm old school, okay? When I started the work, it was all about books, cassettes, DVDs, that kind of thing. I know this will surprise you. We don't use cassettes very much anymore. We also don't use CDs very much anymore. We also don't use DVDs much anymore. And as they've shared with me, folks are transitioning very much away from traditional books. I'll never give up traditional books because I know there is a population that still likes to hold them, smell them, look at them, write in them, that kind of thing. But we are trying to shift a lot of our work into a more digital saturated world. It's where folks live. I talked to somebody earlier about the fact that YouTube is where this generation lives. I mean, they're communicating through videos and things like that. And so this was one of the ways in which we were wanting to kind of add more to it. I will say this. Our work is nonprofit. It's a work of the church. Only members of the church, faithful folks that are involved in it. And we're not here to solicit funds from you. But if you are looking for an organization to donate to, hey, I come to you telling you, I feel like we're really producing good quality material that is up to date. When we first started Think, those of you who've ever read Think magazine, I told my designers, I said, look, there's good stuff out there, but it looks like it was done in the 50s and 60s. We want to produce sound stuff that looks good, that you feel good about handing to your neighbor, your dentist, your postman. That when he looks at it, he doesn't immediately think, oh, wow, that's 1950s. So that's kind of been part of our brand from the beginning, was to try to lead the way in that area.
And the last two things I'll say, again, one of the things we thought of with Focus Plus is like, hey, if people are looking to donate, once again, it's a donation, but you're getting a lot of stuff as far as content goes. And if, let's say you, for example, someone signed up today, you've got access to everything we've ever uploaded since May 1st. And so there's a whole backlog of stuff there. But if anybody's looking for more information, even after we leave, because of course you're more than welcome to ask us questions after this, but focuspress.org is the website. You can follow us on Facebook, all kind of stuff on there. So yeah, we are, myself, Dad, Jack and Joe Wilkie, stay pretty busy as far as putting stuff out. And yeah, we enjoy it. Obviously, God has blessed it. So yes, sir.
Did you say that was on the Patreon app?
It is on the Patreon app. Yes, sir. It should be just under Focus Plus. So, and again, if anybody has any issues finding it on that, just go to focuspress.org/plus, and then you'll find it that way as well. So, very good question. I appreciate that. It's not on Patreon, but I guess we could. Yeah, I mean, we've got the.
I like the hard copy of the Think magazine, but it's, I mean, sometimes you're at a doctor's office. It's not a bad idea. Read something online.
We'll write that down. Yeah, that can be another thing we offer. That's right.
Yeah, it's.
I thought that was one of the ones y'all pitched.
We put articles on Patreon, but
I'm making myself a reminder.
that's a good one. That's a great answer. All right, yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Do you have any children's content?
We do. As far as we've got like young kids material that's like coloring books and kids books that are educational but also kind of at their level. I think we've got a few over there actually that are for maybe some young readers. And then as far as older kids like adolescents, 12, 13, 14, we've got some devotional books that are targeted for young women, devotional books targeted for young men. And so anything else that I'm leaving out?
I mean, the gym podcast, 15 to 25, right?
Yes, for media-wise, yes, this is the podcast. So, yeah, as far as kids stuff, that's also focuspress.org if you want to take a look. I think under the shop category is like children, I think. But, yeah, we try to make enough for all ages. Yes, ma'am?
Well, and I know you had already addressed this a little bit earlier today to a certain extent, but I just wanted to kind of fine-tune it.
Sure.
And that is, with the amount of screen time that people in general, but especially kids, are spending today, is there an amount of screen time that seems to be, and I know this is very amount perspective kind
Sure.
of thing, and of course, depending on what it is they're spending the screen time on, the quality of the content. But in the course of your study and practices, have you found a certain amount that seems to be efficient?
Okay, so let me give you the stats. According to our research, kids are spending 0 to 1 hour per week. 0 to 1 hour per week in the Bible outside of this building. They're spending 6 to 8 hours a day in media. 4 to 6 of those hours is in social media. So we're way already too high. We need to bring that number way down. So here's what I would recommend you do. You and your husband set a number, 1 hour a day, 1 to 2 hours a day. If you're and you can put limits on their phone, by the way. Everybody understands that today the technology exists where you say after 2 hours your phone's going to shut off. You get 2 hours, you hit 1 hour and 59 minutes, that last minute better be really important to you. If your child really reacts in not a violent, but a very visibly upset manner to doing that, they have a problem. Okay? And you may even need to come down more than that. My wife, she's real big about occasionally having media fasts because it's very easy for both adults and young people to get so used to just doing that. And so I would strongly recommend you. The other thing is, so Melinda and I are writing a book on parenting. It took me 25 years to get my wife to write with me. And she told me, she's like, well, if we do this, we're gonna tell people where we got it wrong. And so the very first chapter is things we would do different. And one of the things that we actually, she and I were driving down the road one day and we're like, okay, let's list all the things we would have done different. And one of the things that we would have definitely done different is we would have waited or postponed the introduction of cell phones to our kids' lives longer, because it's so easy, 13, 14, 15, for that to become part of who they are, what they are.
And I'll go ahead and add to that, like I was talking about earlier, a lot of it is about perspective, right? Like I mentioned, there is a difference in spending an hour invested in media because you're consuming biblical content, or because you're talking to a friend that you're not always able to see, and an hour just mindlessly scrolling, right? An hour going through TikTok. The mindset is what's absolutely critical, because they could be using media, they could be using technology to be constructive, to build their life to be better, to build better relationships, to better educate themselves. If they're using it to escape reality, if they're using it kind of as a drug, right, to just kind of mindlessly give them dopamine hits, that's when it becomes a problem. It doesn't matter if it's 6 hours a day, it doesn't matter if it's 6 minutes. That mindset is going to be the problem, and that's what we ultimately have to get to. It's not about necessarily how much time they're spending. Why are they spending that time at all?
The other thing I would add, too, in addition to that question, is think about all the different, when we say screen time, think about all the different things that could be. Video games, movies, TV shows, and social media. And I probably am leaving out some, but there's the four, yeah, and yes, the internet. But there's the big four, right? Personally, I think if you're on social media much longer than 20, 30 minutes a day, you're wasting a lot of time. And so, again, this is not backed up by research at all. This is just my opinion. For my kids, I am going to break it out as far as, like, you got like 15 minutes a day on social media, and that's about it. Now, you want to watch a movie at night, again, as a family, whatever, that's one thing. As Reese is saying, if you got research to do, school, that's a totally different endeavor. But as Dad said, I would break it out by category and then decide how much time you think is acceptable. Again, for me personally, if you're scrolling Instagram, and again, not a big fan of TikTok, but TikTok or YouTube or whatever for longer than half an hour a day as a young person, not only can that obviously lead to some spiritual problems, what do y'all think that's doing to kids' brains? It's killing their brain cells. Let's just be honest for just a second. It's making it very difficult for them to learn. It's lowering their attention spans. And so, yeah, I think there's very good reason to limit specifically social media use to like 30 minutes or less a day. And then the other screen time, again, the video games or whatever you decide to do as a family, I think that needs to be in a different category. Just my personal, again, no research to back that up, but that's just what I think.
So tomorrow morning I'll be talking with the young people about the topic of pornography. Please understand, almost every one of the Reels, TikTok, Snapchat, they have algorithms that track how long your eye is staying on something. So when you pull up a video, if your eye is watching, and they say some of them can even determine what part of the screen you're looking at, but they're tracking how long you're looking at that. And so about the time you're ready to put your phone down, guess what they feed you? They feed you another one that was like that. And they keep doing that to keep you on their platform. But guess what they're also introducing as they're doing all this? They're trying to move you towards pornography. And so it's the porn industry, money-wise, it makes more money than everything, Amazon, NBC, ABC, ESPN, you name it. It is huge. And parents need to understand that social media video is ultimately driving them in one direction. And so
I'll add to that.
just recently, I would say it's even started this year, states have tried to actually kind of crack down on that. They've kind of tried to tell pornography industries and websites that, hey, if you can't verify age, if you can't ensure this is an adult viewing this content, you're not able to show this content. It's illegal. And people are furious, right? You would think, oh, well, this is adult content. Even people in the world, they're going to think, yeah, kids shouldn't see this. No, they want the kid seeing it because as soon as the kid is hooked, that is a customer for life. It's an addiction. It's just like dealing a drug, right? As soon as you get a child, you have them for the rest of their life. And so that's why people are so angry. They want that child because that child represents money. And so that's how they're able to get them. That's why they're so angry at all of these laws.
By the way, do you know what the porn industry does every time Disney releases a movie? They buy every URL that's related to that movie. So like when Frozen comes out, they're going to buy every website name that's associated with every character, every misspelling of that movie, every song that's in that movie. They buy all of the URL web addresses and put it directly to porn.
Hoping that your kid will type in the wrong thing.
Elsa.com, boop, whatever. So, yep.
Very good question. Very good question.
Other comments, questions?
Yeah, we ran into something like that, just homeschooling, doing a Christian application, learning literature, right? And they had to go to YouTube, wanted to start a thing with the parents' permission, so that you're watching this content that's Christian content, but you're learning, right?
Right.
Well, we started a thing, we say how old you are, right? And it's for kids, the kids. I was shocked to find out when I signed my kids up for this, the immediate, there's no algorithms attached so far because you just opened this account. You know those little videos they stick on the side?
They're all,
How
yep,
the parents are lying to you or like all this, like you click on it and it's bad.
yep,
And these are the very first videos
Yep.
where you have no algorithms, you're just signing in.
yep,
8 or 9-year-old child, so that you can watch your Christian content and how to make a doll, you know, and
yep,
and there's this lineup of just vile stuff.
Yep.
And they get you in because you think it's for kids, and your kid clicks on that, you know, they see it on the side, and they're like, oh, what's this? And next thing you know, if you turn your head for a second, they're exposed. It's like, how do you even do this as a
Yeah.
parent? I mean, you sign them up for 9-year-old content, and you're expecting, you know, Christian content you're supposed to watch, and next thing you know, there's just a line of satanic.
absolutely. Yep. Julie, you had a comment or question? That's okay. That's all right. Yeah.
My question was more towards our worship time together in the church and what activities or I don't know how to say it exactly, but maybe service or how have you seen young girls encouraged to be leaders in the church? Because there's a lot of opportunities for our young men. And I think that sometimes it's a little imbalanced, and because men's leadership is out front. And there's, especially in the assembly, the Sunday morning assembly, there's a lot more encouragement for our young men to participate. But to bring and to show our young girls that they're valued in the body of Christ, and to teach them. What are your experiences and maybe examples that you've seen done or you've done with your daughter?
I would say there is a road down the middle, and the church falls into the ditch on either side. There's the one side that is, oh, well, in Christ we're all the same. There is neither male nor female, so we have to get women in the pulpit. We have to have women in every ministry possible, right? We have to have women represented in everything because ultimately, you know, that the instructions regarding women in the New Testament, those are kind of outdated. Those were cultural. So we got to make sure we have women in leadership. That's not biblical, right? And yet we have women who are being given teaching internships, ministry scholarships, right? They're being encouraged to take positions of leadership in worship. And then there's the other side of the road. There's the, oh, what's women's role in worship? It's hush, right? It's don't say anything. only talk at home, only talk to your husband. Your role is to marry an elder or a preacher, and that's all you can do. That's simply not the case, right? Women are given ministry. They are given roles in worship. My girlfriend, she's working on material right now about what is a women's ministry, what is a woman's goal, and what is her role in worship. And I was like, well, why is that necessary? She's like, the Church of Christ doesn't have anything. If you look out into the world, we don't talk about what women are supposed to be doing. We talk about what they're not supposed to be doing. And so they're left with nothing, right? They're left with, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? What is my job? And we have to be looking to the Bible for that. We have to be looking for what should their responsibilities be? How can they be raising their children? How can they be teaching other women within the ministry, within the church? There are so many things that they can do that are positive that we don't focus on.
Yeah, so with Claire, one of the things that my wife did very, very effectively is she kept our Fridays, we homeschooled, and so she kept our Fridays schooling-wise very light, where there wasn't a whole lot of textbook material, and she did that on purpose so that Fridays could be used almost as service days, where they would go make visits, they would go do service projects and service activities. And she was, the whole time she's training Claire on how to be an effective service-oriented person to help care for, provide, cook for, etc. So there was a period in our lives where I was quite literally upstairs with boys, training them in what we called warrior training. My wife had the girls downstairs in our house doing what she was calling, I forget what she called it. You guys remember what she, it was something, but basically teaching them how to do ministry in their lives. And so I'll give you just a real quick, for instance, Claire's 18, probably 4 or 5 years ago, Melinda said, I want you once a week to start planning and cooking a meal. She didn't like it. Claire did not, she did not care for that at all. She felt like it was kind of a waste of her time, and she was frustrated and whatever. But then she started doing it, and eventually her brothers stopped teasing her and realized she can cook good food and started asking her to cook food and cookies and things for them. And it built her confidence. And all of a sudden she realized, but the whole time, here's what Melinda was doing. Hey, we're going to go see Miss Bobby. Can you make XYZ for her? And in doing that, she was practicing some homemaking skills, but she was also practicing taking a dish to somebody in need and serving a shut-in and providing and ministering to somebody who needed that. And so Melinda did a really, really good job of taking somebody at age 14, whereas my consistency was a big deal. We had to be consistent because she didn't want to do it at first. Today, man, she can cook all kind of stuff, and she's very good at it, and she realizes, hey, one of my blessings to the church is I can help care for shut-ins, elderly, sick, etc. And she does that very well.
I would just say, when we're talking about worship and I guess the gathering together, what can women do? Titus 2 is a great place to go anytime we're talking about, hey, what can young women do? What can young men do? Because it's got both in there. But what we see in Titus 2, and I won't read it verbatim, but in the first 8 verses, is we see the way the church is supposed to function. Older men teaching younger men how to be Christians, how to be Christ-like. Older women teaching younger women the same thing. Mentorship is a big concept. The idea of, once again, I talked about a lot last night, there's not a lot of individualism in Titus 2. There's not a lot of me showing up and just being a Christian myself. It's doing exactly what you're talking about, which is looking at the young women and saying, what can we train them up in right now? How can we teach them to serve? How can we teach them to teach a kids class? How can we teach them to support the men who are supposed to be leading worship? There is no denying that, biblically speaking, as Reese said, women don't have a place leading worship. That's just not simply something that God has set forth and authorized. And so outside of that, how can women help support those roles? And again, I agree in the sense that we don't really, in a lot of congregations, do a good job of looking for ways for young women to serve. And so that does involve getting creative and getting very practical. And again, I'm a big believer in writing things down. Write some stuff down about here's what we can do with our young ladies, baking some things, teaching a class, doing, basically looking for what it is that they're talented at and how that can serve the church. And that goes for young men as well, because there's a lot of things young men can do for the church that does not just involve getting up in front of people and leading a song or teaching a class or whatever it is. Young men can serve at people's houses and do a lot of things in that way. And so it does require some thinking outside of the box, but the reason I brought up Titus 2 is because I think it involves older and younger quite a bit. Older women and younger women working together, older men and younger men working together. Again, that's how the church is supposed to operate, in my opinion.
Things like making the communion bread, taking pictures for your website, having a card ministry. There are lots of things that men and women can do. We've just got to think and employ, and in many cases, we actually have to kind of give them the encouragement to do it, because sometimes it's easier just to sit in a pew and not want to do anything and be trained mentally. Well, I'll just come and sing and go home. There's a difference in that versus taking a 16-year-old young lady and saying, man, your pictures that you're taking of nature outdoors, they would look so cool on cards to our shut-ins. Let's make some cards out of them. Or, man, notice you've got really a talent for social media. How about running our social media for the church?
I challenged the young people downstairs just a second ago on something, so I'm going to challenge the older people on something for right now, especially those of you who have parents, maybe with kids in the room. I want you to pick one way that you believe your child, son or daughter, can step up when it comes to church life, whether that be in worship for the men or whether that be in other areas for the young ladies. Pick one way that you think your child can, maybe step up's the wrong way to put it, can be challenged, can go to the next level, you might say. And over the next 3 to 6 months, push them to do that. At first, they're not going to be very comfortable with it. At first, they might push back on it. But as parents, and maybe not even as parents also, as older, as grandparents or as part of this congregation, as mentors, look for a way, how can we push this young lady to take the next step in their faith for the church? How can we push this young man to take the next step in their faith for the church? And then actually push them to do that, challenge them to do that. Again, we talk a lot about these principles. Sometimes it does just pick one thing. Pick one thing for each young person, again, and how can we do that? So that would be my challenge.
It's incredibly easy to be very closed-minded. Right? The Bible says women remain silent, so that's it. No other teaching, that's all we can focus on. It's also very easy to be incredibly open-minded. Oh, well, we don't want to ruffle any feathers. We don't want to suppress anyone. We have to be loving and not judgmental, so they're allowed to do everything. What's challenging is finding balance. That's what we have to do. And not just with, women's roles in ministry. That's what we have to do throughout every aspect of our life. It's not being completely closed-minded and clamping down on this is the only way and there's no other way possible. But we also can't be the other way. We can't just throw Scripture out completely and focus on what makes the most people happy. We have to focus on what's biblical. What is the balance? It's not always going to be completely black and white, this is good, this is bad. And when it is that way, we have to be willing to identify that and call it out as truth.
Good question. Other questions?
Y'all got to ask Luke a question because he is
He's been quiet.
Getting off easy.
he's getting off very easy.
Any thoughts or questions? Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
So since you asked that,
Yeah.
or suggested that, so I grew up as a preacher's kid, and so asking for all of you sons, and for you especially, I guess, for Luke. But yeah, so what have you found the most challenging in being the son of not only a preacher, but a well-known speaker who travels a lot? And then how have you handled that? Because I mean, I know how my family and different siblings handled it, the different trials, tribulations of their birth, right? So there you go, something for you.
Okay, so I would probably say expectations in the sense that since I'm Brad Harrub's son, I know everything about the Bible, and sometimes people are like, ask me all these hard questions that frankly I don't know. Honestly. And so I would say expectations, and I guess it's just kind of hard to find yourself in your own faith, because sure, my dad taught me pretty much everything I know about my faith. He gave me a great foundation, but I have to build on it. I can't just go off his faith. His faith is not going to get me to heaven. It's going to be my faith. So it's pretty challenging to build on that faith, but I think it's something we have to do.
I'll add to that. I have my own ministry, right? My own life is supposed to be my ministry. Whenever I preach, that's supposed to be my ministry. I can't make my ministry Brad Harrub's son's preaching, Brad Harrub's son's book. No, it has to be Reese Harrub's ministry. It has to be my own. I can't ride on the generation, the legacy of my dad. It's great that he gave me that foundation. It's great that people know that Harrub name. But if all they know about me, and if the only thing I am to the rest of the world is the son of a preacher, I'm not making a name for myself. I'm not making an impact for myself, and that's a problem.
Once you answer, then I got a comment.
Okay. You want to go ahead and then I'll answer? Go right ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say that the generational thing, it's every generation's responsibility to fact check their parents. Because, you know, it only takes one generation for the church to just
Oh, sure. Yeah. Did you have a comment? For sure. That's a great point. Did you have a comment, Miss Julie? Okay, we'll circle back around to you then. Hold that thought. We don't want Luke to miss out on that question. I'll go a bit of a different route than what these two guys said, as far as difficulties for being raised as a preacher's son. I guess for me, it wasn't so much the expectations of other people as it was the internal pressure that I felt. This may not be a good trait of mine, and maybe I need to change this, but I sometimes couldn't really care less what other people think about me or what other people expect of me. Again, maybe I should change that some, but to some extent, I do think it's valuable to not care so much about what other people think about you. And so for me personally, it was just, I had a lot of internal pressure kind of built up of like, okay, I've really got to get really good at speaking. I've really got to get very knowledgeable about the Bible. I've really got to make sure that my conduct is what it needs to be. And in some ways, I'm saying that's a challenge. In some ways, it was a blessing because, you know, where the bar could have been lowered for me mentally, for me personally, mentally, the bar was raised quite a bit of like, this is the level that I have to get to. But there is some pressure that comes with that is not always ideal, I guess. As a preacher's kid, I'm sure you can agree with that as well. But I would agree with what these guys said, which is you have to make sure you're not living a reputation faith or an inherited faith, which is because of your last name, you're faithful. It's not the case. And I've seen a lot of faithful preachers' kids who it seemed like that's what they had, is a reputation faith or an inherited faith. And so, yeah, that's something that definitely I had to be mindful of. These guys had to be mindful of, but very good question. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, so one of the things, and they didn't mention it, and that's okay, but I think hopefully they'll agree with me. One of the things that I hope impacted them and impacted your question was I've tried really, 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 really hard to be the person who you hear preaching is the same dad they see at home. Because I think in many circles there is that's that preacher guy and he gets up there and he does his thing, but at home he may be a totally different person. And I think the kids know that. And I think that causes major issues. Our home is pretty genuine and pretty transparent. We joke about the fact that if you want to see a Martha Stewart home, you're in the wrong place, okay? Our house is a house of ministry where we are constantly working on each other and working on things. And so the dad they hear speak is the same dad that they see lounging on the couch, trying to get the dogs off of him and playing with grandkids and things like that, which I think has helped some of them knowing Dad's real. You know, he's not whatever. So, all right, Miss Julie.
Would you, if you would you share maybe some of your favorite, like, daily personal Bible studies? Like something that you really enjoy? Sorry, that might be a little.
That's a good one.
Answer later.
No, I have doing a little plug for you guys, so you'll thank me. Prove Yourself a Man. I think is it over there?
I think we're reprinting it. So
Okay. Prove Yourself a Man from Focus Press. It's a daily, 7 days a week for men that, like Will talked about downstairs, hiring the bar or making the bar high, trying to reset the expectations for men. To Prove Yourself a Man. That one was really good. I love that. Another one is Convicted. I guess I'm kind of biased here because I got all the Focus Press books, but those were really good for me.
other questions?
So we've talked a lot about parents and their roles. What about grandparents? We have a lot of grandparents.
It's a great question.
So they have a role. What role do they play? 'Cause we've been mostly focused on parents. I know grandparents have a role too. So what role we can kind of look at?
Yeah, so everybody turn your Bible to Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4, and look with me at verse 9. It says, "Only take heed to yourself, diligently keep yourself, lest you forget the things your eyes have seen, lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life. Teach them to your children and your," what's the next word? Grandchildren. I firmly believe when I was younger, coming up through the church, we had a mentality that when our kids hit 18 and left the house, we were done. Our job was done. And if you stop and think about it, part of the reason I say that is because we would install elders who weren't qualified because their kids had gone off the rails, but they would say, well, you know, up till they were 18, they're fine and whatever. And so our mentality was, we just got to get them to 18 to when they leave the house, and then we're completely done. This verse says, as long as you got a breath in your lungs, you're to be working on your children and your grandchildren. So to your point, it has become a very sobering but ecstatic part of my life to have my two grandchildren around me and my wife. My wife, when we got married, I could not picture her as a mom, okay? And if she were sitting here, I would say this, and she'd be like, okay, yeah. My wife got a business degree, and she just didn't have the whole mom thing. I mean, it was more, you know, but she bloomed like you would not believe when it came time to be a mom. She absolutely transformed to what I consider to be the best mom around. Grandparenting has done that even more, to where she really is getting the whole older women teaching the younger thing, and she's just absolutely blooming in that stage of her life. We both have gone to bed several times talking about, man, we don't know how long this chapter is going to last, but we both are absolutely loving it and eating it up. I know that grandparents are supposed to spoil their grandkids, okay? That's part of our job. But if that's the only thing that I see, then my legacy is going to do this. Yes, I'm going to take my grandson out and ride him on the lawnmower when his parents don't want him to. I'm going to do some things that maybe I'm going to give him more than 2 M&Ms, whatever. But I'm also going to read to him Bible stories. I'm going to make sure we say a prayer before every meal. I'm going to invest in his spiritual legacy and reinforce everything that he's already putting into him. I love the fact that, you know, he's already, man, he knows he gets his food. It's time to look around, and he actually now assigns prayers. Usually Luke gets to pray for us. But, you know, to answer your question, yeah, Will has his own family. He is the leader of his family. He is, and he'll tell you, I don't tell him how to run his family. I very purposefully tried not to interfere with him. Do I like it if he comes and asks questions or advice? Yeah, sure. But what I am going to do is I'm going to keep trying to pour into him and his children in ways that I think are going to help. My dad, I'm going to tell him more than y'all want to know, but my dad didn't do that. I didn't have that. My dad was somewhat cold, and we didn't do a lot of hugging, didn't do a lot of I love yous, didn't do a whole lot of anything past about the age of 16. It was kind of a, okay, you need to go to college, here's a little bit of money, go be successful kind of thing. Looking back in hindsight, there's so many things that I didn't have a blueprint for that I want to help him and his my grandkids have a blueprint for in a healthy way. And so when I see certain things going, you know, when I see him struggling with XYZ, it's refreshing to me to be able to pour him and to say, hey, I've been there. You're going to make it through this. Life's going to be better. Think about the blessings you've got, and give him that foundation that, unfortunately, I didn't have. Daryl, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think the world rejects the concept of patriotism.
No, it's not. It's not, and it shouldn't be. And if you have any knowledge of the Old Testament, you see the importance of a legacy being passed down through generations and the seed of all these folks. And it's like, one of the points I'm going to make tomorrow is, you look at somebody like Jacob. He didn't just simply sit back on his laurels and say, you know who my granddad is, right? You know who my dad is, right? He had to have his own personal faith. But there was this beautiful lineage that's passed on to generation after generation. And so, to answer your question fully, we're still wading through those waters. My oldest grandson is 2 years old. He is my little buddy. He's my gardening buddy. I mean, love him to pieces. Do I know all the ways that I plan on impacting him spiritually? No, I don't have all that carved out, but I do know this. There are going to be a lot of things that I'm wanting to do and impact him. You know, Lord willing, if his parents allow him, he'll probably go out on the road with me a weekend or two occasionally and get to see Grandpa doing his weekend Christian evidence seminars or whatever. There may be warrior training in his future, all kinds of things that hopefully we can impact him and reinforce what his parents are doing.
Yes, sir.
Will, last night, towards the very beginning, we mentioned the bar, where the church is, and how the bar has just gotten down so low. I think, Brad, you said snail could climb over it. Are we going to talk about that tomorrow, or
I talked a little bit about it downstairs with the young people, but yeah, we can go ahead and talk about it now. This is whenever I teach that particular lesson, I like to kind of open it up and say, how have you guys seen the bar been lowered? And I already talked a lot about the young people downstairs, so I'm going to set that one aside for this particular portion. Let me ask, though, for families, for older people, how have y'all seen the bar been lowered? And I'm not talking about just here. I'm talking about in general, generally speaking, congregation, Christendom, you might say. How has the bar been lowered? Yes, ma'am.
We were doing mission work in Indonesia for a while, about 9 years, a couple different times. And so when we came home to the States, there were more things that were obviously different than before we had left. And one of those, and I don't know that this is necessarily a negative thing, is the Sunday night assembling of the body. That seems to have gone away quite in a lot of congregations. And I don't know, that might just be a
my only comment on that would be not so much about specifically the Sunday night assembly, but about people choosing to not assemble or to skip assembling together in general. I think one of the ways that we've lowered the bars, or one of the ways that we've lowered the bar, is if you're here twice a month, you're a Christian.
If you're here once to take the Lord's Supper
If
on
you're
Sunday,
if you're here every now and then, you're a member of the congregation. I don't think that is a good measuring stick for whether or not somebody is faithful. I was telling the young people, I was in a youth group of like 25 or 30, somewhere around there when I was in high school, and 5 or 6 of them are now faithful. But my definition of faithful is different than other people's definition. That number would be a little higher if the definition of faithful was showed up to church every now and then, maybe once or twice a week, or twice a month, I should say. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. That's not really faithful. When you're repeatedly forsaking the assembling together and you're just kind of punching a time clock with God, that's not faithful. And so that somewhat ties into what Julie's saying, but I think just in general, one of the ways we've lowered the bar is assembling together has turned into, if you make 2 a month, we'll count you as not absent, if that makes sense. And I think that's something we've got to do a better job of. Enforcing is not really the right word, but you know what I'm saying, of making sure that bar is raised. Yes, sir, in the back?
I think it's all reflected in Bible knowledge.
Sure. That.
Christians were known for knowing the Bible. And I'm amazed at how many people don't know how to even find a book in the Bible.
That.
It takes them forever to turn to a passage. And I might get there if I keep using that iPad.
That is, and I'll pass it to Dad here in a second, but that is definitely another, if I was presenting that lesson, that's another area where the bar has been lowered, even for older members, is Bible knowledge. Depth of sermons, depth of classes, depth of just study in general. It has turned very much into, you're very watered down. Again, do you know the plan of salvation? Do you know the acts of worship? Great. That's pretty much as deep as it goes a lot of places. It's a lot of kind of the same stuff over and over again. And so I think that's a way the bar has been lowered, is that older people, older families, again, obviously, if we've got older people and older families that don't know the Bible, why on earth are we going to expect young people to know the Bible really well? That's so out of line that young people need to know their Bible better. Older people need to know their Bible better so they can teach the younger people to know their Bible better. So as far as lowering the bar goes, that's a big one. That's why I'm a big believer in congregations having a plan of, what are we going to study over the next 3 years? Plan it out quarter by quarter, month by month, whatever it is, so that you can ensure. The Bible is 66 books for a reason. There's a lot in there that we need to be studied on and very knowledgeable about. But then, of course, outside of the worship assembly, I think the bar has been lowered for families in the sense of what we talked about all weekend, which is the Bible's not getting opened in homes. The Bible's not, family Bible time is not happening. Bible study is not taking place parent to children. And so, again, that's where the bar's got to get raised, congregationally speaking and in the home. Yes, sir.
Maybe, what are your thoughts on maybe the pros and cons of, say, using lads to leaders or leadership training for Christ in a congregation to help supplement some of this stuff?
I know I said I'd give it to Dad. I'll speak real quick, and then somebody else can have it. I'm a believer in it. I'm for it. We did it growing up, and I think it challenged me as a young person, which is always helpful for young people. I don't really want to do a debate where I have to know both sides of why women can't speak in worship and why instruments are wrong. It was really helpful. It was really beneficial for me. Same thing with song leading and speaking and all these things. So that's my short answer. I'm for it.
I think there is kind of the mindset that, Lads to Leaders, Bible Bowl, these are just competitions, right? They're just judging your Bible knowledge or your preparation for worship, and so that's wrong. And on the one hand, if that's what you're in it for, if you're in it for the competition and you're in it for the trophy, yeah, that's a problem. But if you're going into it with the mindset of, this is going to ensure I'm doing my best, this is going to give me an audience to where if I'm not prepared, I'm going to be embarrassed, I'm going to be humiliated. Yeah, that's motivation, right? Back when I was like 6 or 7 years old, no, I didn't want to put together a speech. No, I didn't want to get up and give that speech.
I thought you could tell your story.
I can tell my story. The first time I ever spoke publicly, the first time, He had written my speech. I was like, what, 7 years old, maybe younger? I was so nervous to give the speech that I left my notes in my seat. That was okay, because I actually had it memorized. But halfway through my sermon, my mind blanked. You know how your mind just kind of resets sometimes and you're like, what am I doing? Yeah, that happened to me and I lost my place. I didn't know where I was in my sermon. I didn't know where I was going. And so I just sat down. It was bad. Literally. Yes. It was miserable. And that happens. I've even seen like high school students during a debate when they don't know what they're saying, they don't have a rebuttal prepared. I've seen tears from high school guys during a debate. It is nerve-wracking. It's anxiety-inducing. That's the point. There's supposed to be pressure. We're not going to be prepared to think through these things. We're not going to be prepared to sing. We're not going to be prepared to give a sermon if there's not pressure, if there's not a way to make someone uncomfortable. We can't just make someone comfortable and live in their bubble all throughout their lives, and all of a sudden they're ready. No, we have to be willing to be challenged.
It takes you out of your comfort zone. I think that's one thing that the church today, it's a big problem, is a lot of people are stuck in their comfort zone of, like we've been saying, coming to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, even Wednesday night if you're good, and then that's it. You know, you're in your comfort zone, you're completely comfortable, and what it does is it takes you out of your comfort zone, and like Reese said, it makes you have to prepare, because if you don't, you will be embarrassed. And I really think the taking out of the comfort zone was really big for me, because if my dad didn't make me do it, I wouldn't want to do it. I would want to stay in my comfort zone all day long. But so I think it's really helpful.
So hopefully you guys have noticed they're pretty comfortable talking when they present lessons and things. And that is not something they came out of the womb with. That is something that they have cultivated and worked on. And all three of these guys, we started young so that when they're older, they don't, I mean, I'm sure there may be a little bit of nerves getting up in front of people, but you probably you don't think about it much anymore as far as getting up and speaking. It's just, they're used to it. Well, if they're used to it at age 16, 17, 18, 19, imagine what they can do for the Lord at age 30, 40, 50 when they have really honed things in. And
Well, and I want to say this too, because a lot of people might think, man, so the only thing I can do and the only thing reason stuff like that is valuable is so I can get up in front of people and teach a sermon, teach a class. I think that's incredibly valuable for young men. I think they need to know how to do that. That's not the only purpose of things like that. The purpose is you get to know your Bible and you get to know how to communicate your knowledge of the Bible. Is all communication of the Bible done at a pulpit? Is all communication of the Bible done teaching a class? No, it is not. Lord willing, these young people are going to teach somebody the gospel one day. You know what that requires? Being able to communicate about the Bible. And so it's not always just, you got to get up there and speak and knock it out of the park and be really dynamic. Sure, that's great. And if that's something that you want to strive for, do it. But that's not all. That's not the grand prize, you might say. The grand prize is your knowledge about the Bible increases and your ability to communicate your knowledge of the Bible increases. Because to me, there's two steps there. You got to know the Bible, have the knowledge, and you got to be able to communicate it. Because that's how the gospel's taught. That's how souls are reached, is by people being able to communicate the gospel, not always done from a pulpit. Sometimes, as has been brought up, that's at a coffee table. That's across a coffee table. That's at a dinner table. That's just having a one-on-one study with somebody. But that's why stuff like that, to me, is really valuable. Is the getting up in front of people really helpful? Yeah, I think it's very, very helpful. I think it's challenging. I think it's good. But to me, the most important, the most challenging, and the most benefit, I guess, that young people draw from that, because, again, young ladies can do that as well. Study with a young lady, maybe a close friend, whatever it is the ability to communicate your knowledge about the Bible. That is the ultimate prize, in my opinion. But that was a really, really good question. Yeah.
I'm going to circle back around to something Julie was mentioning a minute ago, and she talked about, people not showing up maybe on a Sunday night. There have been times, and maybe you guys have experienced this, where, maybe you're doing mission work, or maybe you're doing something, and you come to church, and you almost feel a drain on your spiritual life because folks aren't really all that fired up about it. Don't let that drain you. Melinda and I we've gone through that a few times where you know, we're just on fire. Things are clicking. We're ready just to absolutely do all kinds of amazing things for the Lord. And you get where some of the folks in your church family, and it's like you just got a millstone put around your neck, and it's like, seriously? Don't let that apathy quench your fire. There have been a few times in our lives we've said, okay, if nobody's interested in doing X, we're going to do it. You know, and we plowed through and kept doing things. Sometimes just as a family, sometimes we would call 4 or 5. These guys know, then they could name their names. We would call 4 or 5 families and say, hey, let's just go door knocking. Let's do it. I know it's not assigned and programmed. You know, we're not supposed to be, we're not that group or whatever. Let's just do it. Let's go do X, Y, Z. And so I tell you that to say, don't lose spirit and have that zeal put out. Keep going, plow forward, figure out what you need to do for your family to really stay on fire. So, and as to your last leaders thing, I did it with all my kids, and we did try very hard to make sure they understood there was a difference in what they were learning versus this whole competition thing, because I think you do need to make that distinction in their hearts and minds. But I think all 3 of these guys would tell you it has helped their ability to communicate, even in the business world, which is a great thing. Being able to look somebody in the eye and communicate effectively, that's a skill you need. So, good question. Other comments, questions? Yes, sir.
We've been talking lately of the idea, seems that within the Church of Christ, there's a falling identity of members with the body that they're in. It doesn't get discussed very often. You know, do you say you're a member of this congregation or that congregation? It doesn't seem to be as strong as it used to be. And we've been dealing with that and wondering how we can instill that in our members and new members, when they're immersed in the Christ, if they are they a member of this congregation? And does that help maybe build that bar up? Do they feel more inclined to be here and part of the family, if they feel like they're a part of this family? Something seems to be just kind of disjointed.
Yeah,
Rather than just a floater, like
Just a floater, yeah.
wherever you know.
Wherever you want to go work, it's kind of okay. After the church, whatever they're fine, the church here, but what do you guys feel?
so there are weird instances where maybe somebody has to move around a little bit. I'm not going to dwell on those because those are rare and it's not the norm. My thing would be plug them in, get them involved, and make them understand how valuable they are as a part of your family, and that they are a part of your family, and check on them and text them and encourage them and use whatever talent they have, max them out. I mean, just, hey, you're good with woodworking? Great. We got these 3 problems that we need help with. Oh, you got a brand new mower? Great. We got grass. Come mow it. You know, whatever it is that you can do to get them to feel needed, wanted, and a part of this group. We're at a congregation right now where they have to keep flicking the lights off and on to get us to leave, because we just sit around and talk to each other. Y'all may know what I'm talking about, because we like to be together. We like each other. We want to know what's going on in each other's lives. And if you can instill that in them, they're not going to bounce around. They're going to feel like, oh, this is my home. This is.
They'd rather be here than home doing something different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Only thought I have on that is because of the floater thing. You can see that just about anywhere. I think that's very dangerous, simply because the sheep need to be under a shepherd somewhere. I think that's the way God set up congregations, God set up the church, is there is an authority structure in the home, and there's an authority structure in the church. And so My only addition, I guess, to what Dad said, because of course, hey, plug them in, try to get them as involved as possible, is at some point there needs to be a conversation. Hey, do you consider yourself a member? Because if you do, and I don't even know if y'all have elders, but for most congregations, you need to know. They need to know: are we over you as a soul? Are you one of our flock, or are you not? Because one of the why I say it's dangerous is because if you've got a couple or a person or whatever who's just kind of a floater and nobody's really over his soul, guess what he kind of has free reign to do? Live however, because nobody's over his soul. And so that would be the only thing I would add is you probably need to do everything you can to find out, do you consider yourself a member? Cool. If so, this is what comes with being a member.
And what he just described is what's happening to our college kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our college kids are going off to school, never really putting themselves under an eldership or under the authority of any local congregation near where they're going to school. They're just
They get to
floating.
do whatever they want. Yeah.
And man, when they float, eventually a lot of them just float away. So,
Good
great
question. What's that? Time for like what? One more? Two more? Anything else? One or two more? Yes, ma'am.
So I know you guys are really strongly tied to Tennessee, but would you consider uprooting an extended family and choosing North Iowa as your new mission field?
Here you go, Dad. You're up.
What are you talking about?
I'll take it. Yeah, go ahead.
I've always said that, I'll go where the Lord takes me, but right now in this chapter of my life, we are full-time caregivers for my mom. We built her an apartment. She still has enough cognitive ability to remember her apartment and what's going on there, and she's not confused. When we take her out of that, sometimes she gets more confused. And so to fully answer your question, for my wife and me right now, this is not that chapter. We realize, but I'm not going to answer for 3 young men who may have that ability. Now, if they have grandkids, they're not allowed to move past about 30 miles from my house. So, yeah.
I will say that view we saw today did make it a whole lot easier to go, man, this is kind of nice.
It's all about what your ministry is, right, and what your life path is. I would say for me, for Will, for Luke, right now our ministry is, it's obviously our actual ministry, right? Me and Will preaching. I have multiple congregations, Middle Tennessee. He's got one that he preaches at in Middle Tennessee. And so that's part of our ministry. His ministry is his family, and his work, my girlfriend, all of that based, where we're at. But I try not to make plans more than 5-10 years out, because I know every time I do that, God starts laughing, right? So the future is kind of going to be the focus, right? What is my ministry going to be? I know what it is right now. What's it going to be? What's my job going to look like? What is my financial situation going to look like? What's my family going to look like? So right now, that's Tennessee.
The only thing I'll add is, in addition to what Reese said, every job I've ever had, I have not asked for or sought out. God has literally set a door in front of me. Hey, you gonna walk through it? So I won't rule it out. How's that? I like the question. Did you have something else to add though?
There's a lot of people in this room that could point you in directions of places that need congregations.
Yes. Sounds good.
Oh, I was going to say, and unfortunately, that's true. There is a shortage.
In the back, yes, sir.
What do you think about, kids' class during worship?
I am not a fan. I'll give you a short answer. What? Yeah. Yeah.
Bible class.
Sunday morning Bible class, and then worship. So he means about during the class time, not during the worship time.
Like, what do I think of kids' class during class? Oh yeah, no, that's I don't have a problem with that. Now, one thing I'll say, I think I gotta figure out how to. So I used to work with young people down in Decatur, Alabama, and one of the things that I was a big fan of was getting them in the room with older people as much as possible. And so I do think there are some instances where you don't necessarily need to break out classes. I think things like this, where we've got young and old alike in a room together discussing these things, I think is very valuable. Obviously, that's more for high school and up. Below that, I do not have a problem with kids' classes. I think that they're helpful. Learn at their level. The other thing is, I mean, sometimes there are topics that we need to discuss as older, mature Christians that young ears don't really need to hear. So, good question. What are you going to add?
I will add to that, though. Oftentimes, we underestimate kids.
That is true.
Right? We set the expectations in the bar so low that they're still learning about the birth of Jesus in the youth group. Right? Like my friends and I, we were able to teach a class of, I think it was 4th and 5th grade, and we wanted to actually challenge them. We taught them about difficult subjects. We taught them about salvation. We taught them about symbolism, and they were able to retain it. They may not have been able to fully understand it or understand the significance, but when we were asking them questions, when we were asking them to recap what they had learned, they were able to do it. At that age, I was learning about Daniel and the lion's den. I was learning about, Jonah and the big fish. We underestimate it. We set the bar far too low. We think, oh, well, they're just kids. They'll learn about the important stuff later, and later never comes.
Good question.
So the congregation that we go to right now, Sunday morning they have worship, and that's it. And then Sunday night they have Bible class, and then the invitation. And one thing that I've looked at we kind of just placed membership pretty recently. So it's kind of new to us because the congregation before us, we did Sunday morning class and worship. But one thing I've noticed is that you can focus a lot more on the worship on Sunday morning without class. And a big thing is the Lord's Supper. They spend a lot more time on the Lord's Supper because class is that night, so they don't have to have a separate hour. So it usually, they're not worried about time. It usually goes quite a bit over because they can focus more on worship and the Lord's Supper, and I find that really helpful.
I am going to go ahead and answer the question you didn't ask, and that is, I'm a very big opponent of taking kids out of worship setting. I think I can give you book, chapter, and verse to show you where multiple occasions they would bring the people together, read God's word, and the text says it was men, women, and children. And I think when we take them out of a worship service and give them something their age that's more entertaining, what we're doing is we are training their minds for entertainment instead of training them how to sit through worship and to be reverent to God. And so I'm not going to be up here judge you and say, oh, shame on you if you have kids worship, but I am going to challenge you to think about, is that really benefiting the kids the most? Yeah, they may think that's great, but you know what? My 2-year-old grandson would think me handing him cotton candy every 5 minutes is great too. It'll also kill him. So I shouldn't probably let him discern what is great and what's not. Instead, as an adult, I need to provide for him a good balance of food. And I think that means sitting in here, watching people pray, watching people sing, watching people listen to a worship, a sermon. And so, yeah. Yep. Thank you. One more, and then we're going to let you guys go. And we're going to we're also going to go relax our voices after today. That's right. Oh, nobody's got the last question. Anybody? All right. You provide a safe dry dock for your family's boat at your house and in your church family's house, so that through the week that boat can float safely without holes and leaks on the water the rest of the time. That's the bottom line. When my kids come to 4020 Providence Trail, they know it is a hedge of good things and righteous things. And we are physically separated. We can't really see a neighbor right there, which I like, by the way, because sometimes I like to just walk through my front yard and not worry about having a homeowners association. But I also know if I don't prepare these guys to actually get back in the water, so we have a very safe dry dock where that boat can be repaired and fixed and bailed out and really prepared for the next week. And then Monday morning, I want that boat right back out in the water. That makes sense?
That's a great analogy.
Okay. Every once in a while, I come up with a good one. Tomorrow morning, the seminar continues. We don't want you guys to miss. I know some of you in this room attend other places. That's all right. Just go home, put a sign on the door saying, hey, we're meeting at Sandy Point tomorrow morning. Hey, good. That's good. In all seriousness, tomorrow morning we start at what time? 9:30. Bible class at 9:30? Okay, so I think Will is going to take the adults. I'm going to take the young people. And then 10:30 worship. So we would love to have each and every one of you. Do me a favor. Go home, text somebody, Facebook somebody, invite them to be here tomorrow. Hopefully by now you've seen that we are not like aggressive in your face, slam our hands on the podium kind of people that are going to hurt somebody's feelings that you may be a coworker with, but rather we're really earnestly desiring people to learn the truth and to spend eternity in heaven. And so if you've got somebody you've been studying with, somebody you know, somebody that is not a Christian, take the next 12 hours and really invite them to be back.
Only other thing I'll say, and then I will wrap us up with a prayer, is thank y'all very much for being here. It's a Saturday. You could have been doing a dozen other things on your Saturday for 7-8 hours, however long we've been here. So thank you very much for being here. I'm sure we'll say it tomorrow, but to those of you who set this up, we have enjoyed it thoroughly, and we still have a half a day left. So thank you very much for being here. I am going to wrap us up with a prayer unless there's another announcement that needs to be made. All right, let's bow our heads. Father in heaven, once again, we come before your throne just grateful for the day we've gotten to spend together. Father, we know that there are a lot of threats facing our families. Father, we know that your word calls for us to leave a lasting legacy with our kids, with our grandkids, Father, so that your word can be spread, so that your kingdom can grow. Father, help us to take the things that we've discussed this weekend, the problems that we've seen, and Father, help us to find the solutions and to act on those solutions. Father, help this congregation to support each other, parents to support other parents, and Father, the obvious hope and goal is that everybody in this room ends up in heaven with you one day. Father, help us to do whatever it takes to make that happen.